right, welcome back. Welcome back, everyone. So our next subject matter is microgrids. We have these esteemed gentlemen here with us. Travis Olson, the Native American Client Sector Manager for Tepa, LLC. We have Justin Chester, Client Sector Manager for Tepa. David Tam, CEO, Gray Snow Management Solutions, as well as Peter Gregory, General Manager of Gray Snow Energy. So without further ado, I'll hand it off to you, gentlemen.
Thanks, everybody. You hear me okay? So we're going to talk today about challenges in microgrid development. It's a pretty deep topic, so we may not get through everything, but we'll be around afterwards. We're more than happy to answer questions or talk to people sidebars after the conversation. David will lead.
My name is David Tam. I'm the CEO of Gray Snow Management Solutions. We are tribally owned by the Iowa Tribe of Kansas and Nebraska. We oversee various parts of primary economic development as my forte, but I also come with an energy background. Glad to be here today.
Travis Olson, Director of Development Services. Our focus at Tepa is to really help tribes develop projects, to bring teams together, act as an owner's rep if that's what it needs to be, but also just help develop projects and help get solutions.
I'm Peter Gregory. I am the General Manager for the Green Energy business with Gray Snow, and I've been working with utilities and power systems and managing and controlling electricity for a long time, for about 40 years. In the last 15 years, I've been working on renewable energy and focusing on microgrids, both the concept development, the technologies, and how do we get them deployed.
I'm Justin Chester, Pacific Northwest Regional Manager, head of construction for that region, but also supporting our development unit as well. 27 plus years architecture in the background, so that's kind of what brings us to the table.
So a little bit about Tepa. We're a tribal-owned entity. The Piscataway Band of the Milwaukee Indians in California owns us. We have 10 offices across the U.S., do about $150, $200 million worth of construction a year, a lot of 8A contracting. We've also got a professional services group that does all the engineering. So, whether it's structural, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, all that type of stuff, we do that for tribes as well. And we really do have a mission to work with tribes to help tribes get things done.
So as Gray Snow Green Energy, Gray Snow Management Solutions, again, we are tribally owned as well by the Iowa Tribe of Kansas, Nebraska. Our offices are located in 4 various different states. I'll also make a note that I'm out of the Oregon office. Colorado, we own an entity called SolarTAC, or Grid Next, which is the only tribally owned renewable energy testing facility in the United States. And our Kansas office, of course, and reservation. Our team oversees construction, like the Tepa folks do as well. We have a fiber broadband division, focuses on project management, engineer design, working with numerous tribes across the United States. Renewable energy is the other big one that we're in, which is why we're here today. And we'll kind of talk more about that, but that's generally who we are. Go from there.
So on the topic of microgrids, I think it's a good reminder, and obviously by now everybody's been listening to various parts and pieces of a microgrid, and I think this is just a reminder slide of how great this topic is, right? Microgrids consist of many components coming together to create the microgrid, and I think it's really important to remember, oftentimes we get buried into one component or one part of a full grid system. And that's really our mission here, is to try and help introduce this topic to everybody from a start to finish. There's a lot of pieces involved, your development process, all the way to your funding. We have an example project for you as well, and then obviously the construction piece.
So a little bit about the development side. I think the important thing to remember here is, like the slide at the top of the slide shows, these are the same as any project, whether you're doing a casino, a housing project, an administration building, whatever. You still go through the same steps. You have to have a vision. You have to, have a what and a why for what you're doing and who you're doing it for. You have to program it, understand what we're doing there, and you've got to look at your sites. You've got to make sure that you've got a site that's appropriately scaled for what you're doing, and you've got to have a feasibility study, right? So you're going to be doing all of that for these projects just like you do for a microgrid project. You're going to have a phase where you have to fund it. You're going to have to deal with that design, that engineering, the financing, getting budgets done, all of those sorts of things. Now, it might sound really complicated when it comes to microgrid versus something else, but that's because it's something that we haven't dealt with before. Every tribe's already done it. There's expertise in-house. There's people that you can hire to do it. And it's just like every other project that you successfully delivered. Some of the challenges I think you're really going to see in this, and we really recommend, and we see this a lot, not just in microgrids, but all development. It's the common thing to hire somebody from within, from a budget perspective, to have them manage your project. From our perspective, it's really important that you have somebody dedicated that's an owner or developer that may be outside the tribe, or somebody that has the bandwidth, because what we see a lot are tribes using, the general manager for some entity, maybe it's the housing department, that becomes the owner's rep for a project. You're basically asking them to work 2 jobs. They've got their day-to-day job that they do, their 40 hours a week, and then they've got this second job that they have to do. And that's a lot of burden on those people. And so we highly recommend that you look at that and consider that in your process. So it's expensive, it can cost money, but what it really can do is save you money in the long end on, changes, things that happen, other costs that you pay, and cost overruns. Another challenge that Peter will get into later here is how do you fund that initial piece, that pre-development piece? This is the stuff that you've got to, the feasibility stuff. This is getting early consultants in to understand if your site's viable. These are things that you do before you get your grant funding approved or you get some sort of loan. There's a cost to that, and that typically has to come out of the tribe. So how do you get that money, or where do you get it from? Getting into the expertise side of it, that grant piece, how do you find all those groups and people? There's people like us, there's other people out there that can help you find those expertise to pull them together. It's really about building a team that you guys can trust and that can work for you and deliver a project. Obviously we've got an agreement thing. These are utility provider agreements. We've got a lot of negotiation that you have to go. Again, something that you're gonna have to face, and if you have the right team for it, it'll help you. And then you've always got to consider that ongoing operation and maintenance. These are things that, yes, they may operate perfectly for 10 years, but at some point you're going to have to start replacing solar panels or replacing mechanical pieces in it. And you got to make sure that you've funded that properly during the course of its use by charging some money or whatever it is, so that when it does start the end of life, you have a way to pay for it and keep it maintained.
Yeah, I have a comment on the vision for microgrids. It's a pretty straightforward vision. It is to take control of your power. Oh, sorry. It is to take control of your power and not be dependent upon external to provide that. So we all start with that same vision. Everybody wants to do that. The question is, how do you do it? And that's what this is about.
I'll also add just a note here about the vision. So I work directly with the tribal council and saying, what is the vision of the future of the tribe for the next 5, 10, 15 years regarding the energy systems, or what's the point? So I look at things when we talk about projects and talk about this. As an economic development guy, I'm looking at workforce development, energy sovereignty, what kind of training programs you're going to have, what's the TARO program look like. These are all important elements that address a lot of concerns of the council, because the council is responsible for providing value to the membership. And I think that's the best value that we can bring today is the infrastructure value. So I understand what the vision really is, and then planning accordingly, because every tribe is different. A microgrid's not a box solution. It's a customized approach to every solution. But it's beyond construction. That's my point. It's, you can design it, you can build it, but what are the benefits of beyond that? That's really what you have to be part of the whole vision process. And I can kind of talk more about our experience in a project sample that we'll provide here later today.
And I think one last point to this diagram really illustrates a big piece that we all focus on, and that's the construction. We always think these projects land on the construction piece, but look at the diagram. 2/3 of this diagram is really about planning, funding, your vision, making sure the rest of this is all coming in before you get to the important phase of construction. Now, we always encourage that you get somebody involved with your estimating up front, early in your project. A lot of times it's done at the end or towards the middle after design has already been started. Include these folks early so you know that your grants and your funding is all shaped to the right size.
So today, why do you guys work and I don't? So today is kind of like a perfect storm in terms of funding these deals. And I'll explain that. In the past, it was tough for a tribe to fund them because you didn't get investment tax credits or production tax credits that other people got, because you didn't have tax appetite to use those credits. Well, that's all changed with the Inflation Reduction Act, where the tribes can get not only tax credits, but direct payments up to 50 and even 60% of the cost covered by the ITC or the production tax credit. So the capital cost to install a microgrid now, it has been dramatically improved. On top of that, there is a huge amount of money from the DOE and other entities to build infrastructure and focus on energy and providing energy sovereignty at the tribal level, so you're not dependent on the utilities, which in a lot of cases don't provide adequate power support to the tribes. So you put those two things together, and I can tell you right now, and David will talk about the project, but we're looking at a project where half is funded by a grant and half is funded by the ITC. And we are going from a horrendously poor reliability power system that causes damage to equipment. It's a huge impact on the tribal, the casino operations. It's an impact on the people who are out in various locations who don't have adequate power. I've seen a case where there were 8 power outages in one day. We're going to change all that. We're going to put in a brand new system, and that system is going to be basically 100% available, 100% power, reliable, and we are going to fix and know the cost of electricity and the availability of power, reliable power, for the next 30 years. And we're going to control that on the tribe. Everybody in the tribe needs to know that. So what do we have now? There's a lot of grant funding. Everybody should be out there right now looking for grants, because there's so much money that has to be spent, and they don't know how to spend it. Second, tax credit funding. You're entitled on a renewable energy project to get up to 50, actually up to 60 in certain tribes, money back as direct pay credits, not as, or direct payments, not as tax credits. Those two things make it a no-brainer that everybody should be looking at this. So the question is, how do we do it? And I think that's where people need help. How do you get a grant? What do you got to do to get a grant? Who's available to help you get a grant? How do you define and develop and engineer and do the pre-development stage on a microgrid so that you can put the package together that can get the grant or get the ITC or get the funding to construct this thing? In terms of grants, there's partially in getting the grants, there are multiple things you can do. Right now, the government is not only putting out a bunch of money in terms of grants, they're also putting out technical assistance programs that give you the ability to model these things, to design these things, to do economic analysis, to do social impact analysis, so that you can plug that into your grant and get the grant money. So FEMA, DOE, Sandia Labs, National Renewable Energy Labs, these people are all helping us on our tribe put together that package to get the grants that we're looking for. So I'll just summarize. It is a perfect storm right now. It's almost too good to be true. It's a generational thing. This will never happen again, right? Where you can actually get funding to install, to go from crappy power to perfect power and not have to pay for it. And it's not just now, it's the future. You're hedging against, if there's a catastrophic event on the power supply and it causes a catastrophic event on the tribe, you can hedge against that by putting your own power system in. You can hedge against where's the price going to be on energy in the long run. You can hedge against that by putting a power system in that you control, and you do it on your tribe. And when I say power system, it includes generation. So I think everybody needs to look at that and figure out what it is that I got to do right now to take advantage of this perfect storm.
Hey, and Peter, real quick question that just occurred to me. Can you use grants to fund the ongoing operations and maintenance too? Is that something that was just something that popped into my head?
Yeah, yes, you can, and so it's built into the price. There's a lot of different ways to do that, but if you're not paying for energy, you're not buying energy from the utility, you're taking control of your energy, paying a little bit for O&M, washing solar panels off once or twice a year. It's not that simple, but it's a relatively simple process. I also want to point out that owning your own utility, there's a lot of complexity, there's a lot of software, there's a lot of know-how, but that gets masked in the technology and the deployment of equipment and software that you put in. So it's a simple process. I tell everybody, it's simpler than operating and maintaining an HVAC system in a building. It's really, in terms of the O&M, in terms of what you got to do, it's a white box. For example, that's a battery. You don't have to design the battery control system. Somebody's doing that for you. So, yes.
Going back to the other, no, you can leave on this one, it's fine, it's fine. I just want to add too that doing a project and getting financing for a project is not an easy task. But I also want to give hats off to anyone that's part of the DOE that's in here today, because the DOE technical assistance is something that any tribe can apply for. FEMA technical assistance, any tribe can apply for these. You guys should be applying for them if you have not. It's also critically important that we are doing your energy planning, energy strategy, right? What does it look like? Again, I mentioned before the 5 to 10 years kind of process. Now this picture, looks great. Put the slide together, and I don't know how long, but it didn't take us too long. But this is like years of planning and discussion and talking, and I don't know if you know, but Peter and I, we're both 25 years old. We just look this way because we have a grant due tomorrow. So, yeah. Oh, yeah, that's right. He's a year older than I am. So full disclosure, he's 26, I'm 25, but. Honestly, the last 3 nights, we've been sleeping 3 to 4 hours a night trying to get some stuff. And, with a grant, it's like you can never get it perfect enough. You always think you can just change it and change it and change it. You'll keep doing cycle after cycle. So I can't, and if any grant writers in here, hats off to you guys, because grant writing right now, you guys are like worth your weight in gold, and it's not easy. So just another note is on the grant side of it is that, these grants are coming out, they get back about a 2-month window, right, to apply for this. What does that really mean? You can't start applying your grant when the window opens. You need to be planning this grant out like a year ahead, or at least, if not more, and get all your stuff ready to go to drop it. Some people are like, oh, the grant came out. They call us, hey, can you guys write a grant for us? We're like, no. We cannot write, especially a DOE energy grant. I mean, these things are behemoth, in my opinion.
So, quick question. On an earlier slide, we had a comment, survive your voting cycles. How did you guys survive when this took many years with this particular example?
The energy plan is key. If you have a tribal council that adopts an energy plan that says, this is where we're going to go the next 5 years, this is our goals and our initiatives, that's going to be the fundamental piece that's going to carry you through councils. If you got a 2-year rotation, it's brutal. I mean, I'm fortunate our council's got a 4-year rotation. So the council leadership has been super supportive of this. And also, it's universally known that people who live in this community and their council, and they're just experiencing, we averaged 30 outages in a year. Just to give you guys a scope. Those 30 outages a year, it's pretty expensive. And so the experience, they live it. They're like, oh my God, I don't have power. My CPAP machine just shut off in the middle of the night, or I can't get to my meds, or whatever it may be. Then they're also like, okay, it's urgent. This system out here, we're at the end of a utility line. So just to give context, this is on the border. So again, it's the Iowa tribe of Kansas and Nebraska, because they're straddled 2 states, right on the Missouri River, right in the middle of America, close off of I-29. Maybe you guys don't know what that is, between Kansas City, Missouri, and Omaha, Nebraska. I apologize. So we're very rural. This is like a tribe, and this is a casino you see right over there, literally in the middle of a cornfield. That's kind of the way that we kind of explain it all out. So this project here, just to kind of you guys give a sense, we designed this system to really identify the critical facilities. And critical facilities is what's going to be needed in case of emergency. We all know that. And then we also talked about, what are some of the other elements that are needed. So we have a Grandview station down here. This is fuel, gas station, we have some cabins down here. We have a food pantry over here, police station, fire station, and again, a casino. We have trouble administration that's further up. We don't show it in this one here, but there's actually another microgrid that's being added to this one here. But I just want to kind of give a general idea. This is about, our project total is going to be about 1.65 megawatts on the project, and it's going to serve 18 buildings in total with 8 critical facilities. But, to get the energy loads, to analyze all this, to understand, what's available as a resource, this is kind of a critical process. It took us a while. When I first came out to them, so my background was I got connected with this tribe because I did the Solar Near Community Challenge years ago. And it's about how to solarize communities. The education factor around this is a cycle. That's why I talked about the 2-year cycle versus a 4-year cycle in election. There's a lot of educating that has to be done here to get a council and the membership comfortable enough to understand why are we doing a microgrid instead of doing a 20 megawatt solar array or a 100 megawatt wind farm somewhere or whatever else it may be. We had to do a site analysis. We had to do the resource mapping. There's a lot of work that went into all that to understand that, and a lot of help came from doing a lot of technical assistance and then getting, people to understand this industry well enough. So that's why, we talk about doing this work, it's complicated, but back to the grant writers, there's only so many people, and to do an application can be expensive. So that's why I always recommend a couple of things. You guys will probably talk about this a little bit later, but we work closely with Tepa. There's a process that they have that works with us called a quick look process, and they could talk about that. But it's a very inexpensive way to do a quick look at a site and say, this is our goals and objective. Where can we do this? How can we do it? It's a really inexpensive process. I won't say the number, that's their business, talk about money, but we're a part of that process, and that's kind of an early way to really set that foundation. So I just want to make sure that, you go that process first, do a quick look, that helps you actually get a lot of data that you can actually apply to a grant. And that will actually help the grant writers, because a lot of grant writers, unless you're really specific in energy-related grants, it's not the easiest thing to do. Because the grant writers pulled into HUD, they're pulled into domestic violence, they're pulled into all these other grants. But when it comes to energy, you got to have somebody that's dedicated to that. I think you guys mentioned that earlier, is having a person that's really there to actually lead that effort. If it's a council member or an energy consultant, wherever it may be, somebody has to lead that project. This is like a full-time effort. So this is not a part-time on the side or on the weekend thing to do. If you do, it'll take you like 5 years to probably get to where you need to get to. That's just my opinion on this.
When I wanted to add to David's graphic here, something to keep in mind, this is one particular part of their total master plan. And I think the message we want to get out to tribes is that as you're master planning, start thinking about your renewable energy for each one of these projects. Each one of these is a project. Each one of them has separate grants for each one of those components, not just the solar array. So I think as we begin to think about renewable energy for a tribe and your tribe, make sure that you're introducing the topic for every single project, your child care facility, your IHS facilities, whatever your project is that your tribe's considering, bring up the question, how can we introduce renewable energy to this project and make it part of your grant process? In the end, that's what's going to help build your total system for your microgrid for your tribe.
Yeah, and I'll add to a simple concept with respect to the council. If you tell anybody that we're in an environment where we can get funded without any impact to us to provide control of our energy and hedge and insurance against some catastrophic event down the line, and you tell them that we can do that and we've got a plan to do that and that's our energy plan, anybody that's elected to the council that doesn't support that is going to get thrown off that council pretty quickly, because it's so obvious now. It wasn't before, but it's so obvious now. And the other thing I'd add is it's not just renewables either. It's not about adding renewables. That's great. And anytime you're going to add generation, add clean generation. But It's controlling all this stuff, including, like, we have a 500 kW diesel generator and a couple other diesel generators on there. It's controlling everything together to give you 100% power availability. And that's the goal. You can go from crappy to great, and it's not going to cost you anything. No council's going to get in your way.
I would toss into that too, on the front end side, the pre-development side of it. I mean, we've probably all heard, like, hey, they're going to do another casino, and we got to do this master plan, and we got to plan the community. Maybe it's a housing development. We got to do a master plan, something like that. When you're looking at those master plans, you should be planning for that, right? Like, you should include in those conversations the green energy aspect of it, whether it's solar or it's wind or it's, whatever, or even with like a casino, you've got your generator, you should also have power like that. Not only is it a good backup, but it's also a cost-effective thing for you in the long run, right?
I'll also add in this process, we did a site resource map. So the casino's got a 500-gallon diesel generator on that site. So how do you integrate an existing asset into your plan? That's going to be important. You don't just rip out equipment and put all new equipment in. You don't necessarily have to. And some of the smaller buildings have a Generac generator on some of these sites as well. So we had to take those into consideration as well. And then if you guys do like the FEMA's technical assistance, they're going to do like what they call the benefit cost analysis. That's going to be valuable to you guys. If you guys do the Sandia project, get their support, they'll do a social impact study that shows the monetary value of you losing power at your site. In our case, we did something unique, and this is the first time that they actually did it this way. We actually got DOE technical assistance layered with FEMA together on the project. DOE then brought in Sandia National Labs as a part of that process as well to do a different analysis. They all had different analyses that worked together. And they were like, wow, this is amazing. You guys have this tool over here. And DOE is like, yeah, we have this tool over here. And we combined them and used all those tools together to get a really strong support team. I could not have asked for better material out of these guys ever. So, I mean, highly, highly recommended that. Also, it's important to note here too is that in the future, when you talk about building new buildings, I will just tell you from a single home, because we do home stuff too, and we'll talk about it a little bit later. But back to your point earlier is about when you guys are planning to build new buildings, you should be planning renewables as a part of that. In the future, renewables like solar panels will be just standard like an HVAC system in a building. Because if you build new into the building rather than doing a retrofit, you're having about a 46%, I mean, it probably varies a little bit in there, but a 47% savings by designing it into your existing building rather than doing a retrofit. So don't like say, oh, we'll build this building now, and then we'll add solar panels down the road. If you plan it for early enough, you can probably save some of that money, but it's going to be more expensive. So if you can, try to do it together. If you can't, that's a funding issue. I understand that as well. But just want to make that note because that's something that we will face when we do. We're actually in the middle going to look at expanding our police station, fire station, and EMT services into one larger building. That's part of but that's a different grant. But when you write that grant, we're going to write it in that we also want to add renewable energy. It's a critical services site, right? You write into your grant for that project as well. So back to some of those notes you were saying before. Want me to go on this one?
Yeah.
All right, so this is some of the stuff that we do in general is like, what does Greystone Green Energy do? And we do kind of all these parts at different phases in the process, and this is all stuff that we work on. I do want to highlight over here, you guys see this Grid Next, GRIDNXT up there. If you guys go to that website, that again, that's the tribally owned by the Iowa Tribe of Kansas, Nebraska, 73 acres, renewable energy testing facility out in Aurora, Colorado. We have solar trackers, we have ammonia fracking systems, we have energy systems. This single line drawing over here, this is actually our microgrid testing facility right here. So if somebody like an ABB or Siemens or some technology wanted to come and test it in a real world environment, third party site, this is what we have there. This is our commitment to energy projects. Is that you build a project, before you deploy that $5-6 million into a project, you want to test it. We're a site that actually can take your stuff and test it on our site in a simulated environment before you build it all out. So you want to talk about whatever equipment you're going to be using, you got to make sure that microgrid, the controller that Peter's talking about, is actually able to deliver what you guys are expecting to get out of that. So you guys, if you go to the website, you guys can see an aerial video of that. You can see our general manager, Dustin Smith, is out there on that site. We invite anybody to come out there and visit the site anytime you'd like. But that's kind of one of our big commitments. So we acquired this about 6 months ago. We did not do a press release on it quite yet. It's coming out, but that's something pretty exciting and pretty new. So the team that we have really does all these kind of services here. Down here below, you kind of see a little housing model. That's what we call the RCES model. It's essentially microgrid for subdivision, for houses. Talking about aggregating solar, doing a community energy storage system. California, you can use that energy system for a spending reserve, sell back to utility. In Kansas, you cannot. But these systems are all kind of different. So we're just kind of showing some examples of the work that we're doing right now. And really, where we focus our efforts is right through here, this whole system here.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. One of the things we're doing at that Solitac facility is we've got a contract with Ford and Commonwealth Edison to look at the F-150 being integrated into and with a battery system to be able to provide two-way flow so that you can use your F-150 as a battery in your house to power your house at night, and you charge it in the day with your solar system. And that's what a microgrid is all about. You use the battery when you don't have solar or wind. You charge it when you need to charge it, discharge it when you need to discharge it. You control the whole thing, and that's what the complexity is, but it also is what the value is. And I think the F-150 project is exciting because that is a pretty cool truck. It's a pretty cool system. And I think, in the end, every tribe is going to have charging stations and EVs, and set up the infrastructure for that.
I wanted to add something to that. I mean, you bring up a great topic that is pretty much a hotbed right now, right? Like, there's this battle between fuel-based vehicles and EVs. And we all have friends and family. My family has a ranch in Idaho, and I can't get my relatives to even think towards EVs. But it's coming. And I think the more we start preparing those conversations and having those conversations with our leaders within tribal council, and you mentioned earlier having your plan. I think that's the most important piece. The longer that we don't talk about technology, the longer we don't talk about innovation, how can we get this into our projects? How can we involve our tribal members, get everybody behind these new innovations? It's going to be a wall. And the wall that you hit is much harder to experience. But tribes that are getting in front of these efforts early are going to be in front of the problems, and it's going to be a much easier transition.
I'll also add note too that in regards to all we're talking about here is that there is a lot of grant funding. So transportation. So for example, we're switching right now from traditional diesel trucks in a rural community. There's a transportation grant that we're going to be writing into, having electric charge stations, and then also eventually electric vehicles just for tribal use to help save costs, right? And it's also, again, part of our sustainability mission. So again, that mission is important, but I'm just saying the transportation grants to do that. And then also we're doing solar training and O&M training for microgrid. So we have a training program that's developed for this, and also our fiber program, because if we can, if you build a system we talked about earlier, that's great, you can build it all out. But again, how do you operate and maintain that system is going to be a critical piece. And we encourage tribal members to do that. So what my big thing right now is, a lot of tribes are talking about doing these large systems, very, very big systems, and sell power back to utility as an economic model. More power to you. But my thought process is different. My thought process is that you need to be designing systems to take care of your people first. Energy sovereignty is going to be the key component, because you're going to have some other vendor trying to sell equipment come out to your land and say, hey, look, we want to put a huge solar array out here for you guys. We'll manage it, and they're going to take all that power, and they're going to try and sell that power back to you, but it's on your own land, or how your agreements are, I don't know. But the point being is people should be designing a record system to take care of your own people first and foremost. Train your own people to help run that system. Those people who are trained are an economic development engine. Those monies will stay within your community, your multiplier. I don't know what, tribes have different multipliers. Our multiplier is like 3, but some tribes are like 6 or 7. Great. But those dollars should recirculate back in your own economy. It shouldn't go out. So if anyone's out here selling equipment only, I apologize, I don't mean to burst your bubble, but the bottom line is that you should be doing systems to take care of your own people first. Don't worry about the utility. Utility is if you have excess energy, like the system I showed you before, that's designed to take care of our own power about 85% level. Why is it not 100%? Because you'll never run a facility at 100% all the time. So I just want to make that note that that's really going to be key. We're generating power for ourselves to lower our cost of power, increase reliability, train people how to run our own systems, and eventually become a tribal utility authority. So take care of yourself first before you worry about going somewhere else. And by the way, these systems, you can deploy microgrids from a construction standpoint fairly quick. But the planning process that takes up a lot of time. Getting those approvals, that takes a lot of time. But I just want to make note that that's our models. What we're doing here is to exercise our tribal sovereignty. Let me clarify really quickly. For the room, I say ours because I'm a Chinese guy. I'm not tribal, but I say ours because the tribe treats me like family, and I treat them like family. So when I say ours, that's what I mean by that. I don't want to misrepresent myself to anybody, so I'll clarify. And I'll tell you guys another day, how's a Chinese guy from Eugene, Oregon, work with a tribe in the Midwest? Another story for another time. We'll talk a lot aside about that later. But the bottom fundamental line is trust and performance and doing what I do and taking care of the people, because I treat this community like it's my own community. So that's what it comes down to on that note. But this is what it's going to be about. And I want to say that because you want to make sure you're bringing consultants or people or whoever in that really has the tribe's interest first, not about selling a system or selling equipment, and not over-designing a system just because it meets their financials better. So it's not like, oh, well, we'll give you 50% of your power to your tribe, and then 50% go to utility. That utility battle and selling power to the utility, if a lot of people out here know already, it's not the easiest thing to do. Getting power to the utility on agreement, a PPA arrangement, or whatever it may be, it's not easy. Sorry.
Let me just reiterate, the way it's always worked up until today, literally, is someone would come in, take the tax credits, install a system, own and operate the system, and sell you power on a power purchase agreement for the power that's generated on your reservation. And so you're basically buying, the way it's always worked, you're buying from another utility. It just happens to be a private utility instead of a public utility. But now we're talking about today, you own, operate, and finance these things, put them together yourself, and you really have control. And I just reiterate that. It's not the PPA model anymore.
Sorry, I stuck out the air of the room, Justin, so go ahead. Apologize.
Just to get a feel for the room, how many folks are general contractors or subcontractors in the room? Okay, so this last phase, and it's not purposely last, but it is oftentimes the implementation of your project. Like this presentation, you spend a majority of it in the planning and the funding and the preparing side of it. The last piece, the expensive piece, is the execution piece. But boy, if you miss something up front, that's where you really feel it when you're trying to implement the build. And so what we're trying to do is get the message out early. How soon can you get your general contractors involved in your projects? It takes a phone call to ask somebody if they want to be involved and provide early estimating for your project. Most contractors want that phone call. I know I take every single one of them. I'll find a way to help anybody with their project so that we can figure out what's the right price that you're going to need to fund. That's really important. I can't tell you how many projects we come across that we are first introduced to pricing concepts after they've already drawn 50% of their DD sets. It's a huge risk for your design fees. It's a huge risk for your funding process to not get a contractor involved early. Also, figure out if your tribe has a list of preferred vendors. We always ask this question when we meet tribes, who's on your vendor list? We're not saying that we're going to partner one-on-one with just those vendors, but we should definitely include them in the pricing exercise so that everybody is fully aware of what this project is going to be about. Price is the most important piece of this. I think that kind of gets us through a lot. You're getting through your necessary funding. That documentation is extremely important. A lot of banks and feasibilities, they're going to ask, how did you come to this price? Obviously, for us, we involve all the subcontractors we can. We have a lot of traveling native-owned subcontractors who like to work with us throughout the U.S. So that gives us regional experience. So we can go into regions and have extreme knowledge that the Pacific Northwest is like pricing San Francisco. But if you don't know that and you go into a region and you're trying to estimate something, you could really find out that the cost of concrete is twice what your budget was. So we do a very good job of trying to reach out and make sure those folks are tied in. I think down here you'll see material testing and quality installation. This has to happen as part of that, really that partnership between the general contractor, the subcontractor, and who's supplying the solar panels, for example. The solar panels that are picked early on are all based on their ability to produce that energy. So if you switch it in a VE exercise, what did you just do to all of the calcs for that project? And that's something that people forget, is like when you get into this 2 years, 3 years down the road, and your budget is up against constraints, there are certain parts you can change, but there are certain elements that you shouldn't change because it's going to require re-engineering. Commissioning, maintenance, and warranty service. This is a big part about what contractors should really ask questions up front. Is everybody prepared to what we need to do? Oftentimes, architects and engineers will write the commissioning into the spec, but it's the first thing that's VE'd when you get to the actual project. Because everybody says, well, we don't want to pay the extra $60,000 or whatever it may be to have our system commissioned. It's an extremely important process. Don't skip it. It's what really helps you know your system that's installed is performing the way it was engineered and the way it was intended to. Does that make sense? And I think bonding requirements, it's always down here at the bottom. We've come across many projects where our clients will suggest, hey, Tepa is a fully bonded company. We understand that you bring bonding to every project. But we have somebody over here that will actually do the project without bonding. Can't we just not do that? So that's the risk, right? Why would you bond these types of projects? Well, if something goes wrong, I get hit by a bus, what's protecting your tribe and your project? So do what you can to learn that bonding process. It's really important. And don't VE it. Make sure that the contractors you're working with are qualified, they're insurable, they're bondable. Ask those questions up front.
What's VE stand for?
Excellent. So VE is often just your value engineering process. We usually see this when you've spent 2 years planning your project, and then you finally get to bid the project and you find out, wow, plywood went from 43 bucks a sheet, now it's $93 a sheet, which is what we saw in Pacific Northwest during COVID. How do you accommodate that? It's an extreme cost, right? So the first thing people start doing is cutting, right? They start finding ways. We strategically call it value engineering, trying to get the value. The truth is that your project's got a budget issue. You have to find solutions so that you can still execute your project. Okay. Yeah, I think we hit all of these topics. And I think there's always important pieces here. One of the things that we really try to do as Tepa, if your tribe has a TARO program, many GCs are very, very shy about talking about TARO. It's like a disease they don't want to touch. Like, I don't want that. Like, what do we have to do to minimize TARO's involvement? We treat it exactly the opposite because it's actually a very powerful tool to involve your tribal members in your project. It's very important. But when you go through that process, it's also very important to prepare those TARO members so that they know what to expect when they step on a job site. Oftentimes, they are actually hired by your subcontractor. So when I'm a GC and I have to talk to my subcontractors on a project, that's the first thing I do when I make the phone call. Yes, expect there's TARO. Yes, expected to be hired, their tribal members to perform on your work. Now, there's certain things, obviously, I'm not going to put a tribal member who's never operated a crane on a crane, right? There's certain things you have to really pay attention to. Certified electricians are another great example. But there are many parts of a project that Terrell members can actually be a key part of. One of the conversations that I like to have with every Terrell program leader that we work with, help me before we get to the job site. Do your members have resumes prepared? Have you had conversations about, unfortunately, drug testing? It's not my, I can't force my subcontractor to not implement what all of their other employees are subjected to. So that's very much a part of their process that you have to help everybody be aware of.
We have very close relationships with the Terrell offices, and that drug testing component, it's so essential and convenient to have it right on res. And these are the tribal members that we're employing on these jobs. They have a relationship with these folks, and they feel more comfortable about it. And it's a wonderful relationship.
I was going to say one other thing too on the Terrell side. We talk about the length of time it takes to get a project like this started, financed, and done. If you know your tribe's chasing it, if you're in the Terrell or you have any way to talk to the Terrell department, education is great. You've got a year or two here to start educating people in what they need to know to be part of a project like a microgrid, getting the certifications they need, whatever they need to be so that they could do some of the install, that type of thing. I think that's something too that the Terrell departments can do, especially specifically microgrid related.
And start the waiver process early.
All right. And then communication. For us, it's all about communication. We've had projects where Terrell's hard and the Terrell department's great, but the labor force is difficult. The more communication you have, the better everybody does. The Terrell department understands what's going on with the labor. The contractor understands what's going on with the labor. Council, everybody understands. That is really the key.
And on the communication piece, there's hard realities with some of our tribal members and where they're currently at and then expected to go onto a job site, right? So I talk about safety up front. We talk about all the elements that they could face to make sure they're ready and prepared to step on a job site. I ask them if they need help. Do you need training? Do you need an OSHA 10? We don't expect an OSHA 30. That takes a long time to get. But there are ways that you need to ask the questions of each person coming onto your job site. Setting simple expectations that we take for granted every day because I have a paycheck every day. Helping them understand you've got to fill out a time card every single day, every week. You've got to sign it. If it's, prevailing wage, I need to have this. This is part of our documentation. And yes, you're not going to get paid weekly. It's going to be a delay. Here's when you should expect your check to actually show up. I've had some of our members give me a driver's license that didn't have a matching address to where they actually live. And so their checks were being held at the post office, and then I was the enemy that wasn't paying them. But the post office had them. But I also didn't learn about that until 2 paychecks later. So there's some subtleties, right?
We could have 4 hours of conversation
Right.
about this.
Yeah.
But having checks sent to the Terrell office is a way to avoid that.
Exactly.
We do that. And the mark of a good contractor, y'all, is one that's concerned about these things.
Right.
And also informing the subs ahead of time that this is not average suburbia and that there are, that you need to have a trauma lens and understand that these are human beings that need a little bit more forbearance than folks that live off res, and that the work ethic and the intelligence and the commitment you'll get is way more valuable than maybe the day of time you lose by giving them that forbearance if they need a day.
Absolutely. Well, and I think, too, to be cognitive of tribal members that are going onto this environment, they're going onto new teams that they're not a part of. So automatically they feel like an outsider because they're not part of the framing crew that's already been doing this on 12 jobs, right? So there's some things there. Tepa's been thinking about how do we introduce mental health support, right? We're a tribally owned company. We want to be able to have those services. Do we offer that up to on-site services? Somebody can call in and say, hey, I just need to talk to somebody about what I'm experiencing. But if you don't communicate and you just drive straight down the track thinking everything's fine, that's usually when you hit the wall. You hit those problems.
Just as a rule of thumb.
One second, sir. We got one question here. She has a
Good to see you, David, again.
Good seeing you.
I just wanted to share also just a comment to the commissioning, the slide. So if you have a contractor, or like I'm just speaking from my experience, and you're doing your budget, and you're commissioning it, right? If you're putting in your equipment and you're telling the tribe or your client, your tribal client, this is what your expectation is to have this product function or your design. Like some of the work that I do, I have a not to exceed. It keeps you accountable for the budget. So you don't have this like run on budget. So if you're dealing with businesses, these are the business practices that hold you. So if you have a grant and it's off the grant and you're doing infrastructure, part of that is there's going to be these requirements that are going to go through the budget, and you have to make sure early on that you're getting your equipment, you're planning your project management time. You have to really think about those hours and also those costs, although we know cost change, like you're indicating in supply. We're dealing with that right now, but that's what I do. So we're really hard to looking at that of the budgets because I don't want to come back to a client. And so I hold myself as a business owner not to exceed. And some people, if you don't know those things, they'll say, oh, it wasn't in the budget, right? Oh, it wasn't in the budget. And you're like, well, we hired you to be thinking about these things. So I just wanted to emphasize that in terms of what you were saying is very true. And those are those little details that in a contract when you're sitting there and you're responsible for a multi-million-dollar project and then something happens, you're responsible and accountable.
So-
that's just the nature of the business, right?
Yeah, and one of the things that we like to do, because, the construction contract, most projects, is the largest contract by far of all the contracts you have, right? But early on, like very beginning of the project, we like to try to get all the different stakeholders in the room. You've got the contractor, you've got the engineers, the architects, you've got your FF&E material, all that stuff that the owner's got to provide, and actually talk about everybody's contract and make sure that it adds up and that there's not a gap. Because if we notice there's a gap at the beginning of construction, we can adjust the scope of the contract for the construction to fill the gap. If we discover that that gap is at 90% through construction, and the owner thought that we had some piece of casework, and we thought that they had it, it's too late, right? And so that's something that's really important to do too, is just to make sure you don't have any holes early, because that's when you can fix them.
Hi, I'd just like to know, as a rule of thumb, what should a tribe be getting a return on a project, a solar farm?
I mean, return on what? I mean, I guess that
Well,
comes down to what-
revenue, I should say.
I would say that's
That's going to be very variable based on
Yeah.
location because you could be in Pacific Northwest or you could be in Arizona and you can have different revenues. So it's about generation on those panels.
Just give us some examples, please.
I don't think, I have to take this offline probably because I couldn't give you numbers off the top of my head. I do a little bit low, but I don't like to give numbers in regards to that because if I give you a false sense of number, then it's not going to really do you any good or do me any good, to be honest with you. So I can take it offline.
We're talking to a number of different parties and we're getting quotes of between $1,000 and $1,500 an acre per year. It just seems a bit low to me.
I think it probably is a load to you because the reality is unless you do an actual analysis, an actual study to really determine that, you're going to be all over the board, to be honest with you. Because I'll tell you, like 12 kilowatt on my house, I have a solar storage in my house, I go off grid. But the system in my house in Oregon costs a lot more money and the return is a lot less than it does in Arizona. And so it wouldn't be fair to give you an estimated number without doing an actual analysis, unfortunately. I just want to be just forthright. So everyone just says off the napkin, they can just give it to you. You give you a range maybe, but exactly.
It's all tied to the gear testing, and I was going to add to that, David, is, I've had examples of, we had family had 400 acres in, North Dakota, and you'd think, oh, natural fit for a wind farm. But it actually took 2 years of studying wind patterns to determine if it was actually a viable, feasible project. And then from there, they had to determine the cost analysis 2 years later after the testing. And the actual budget to install that system outweighed the gain from the wind because the wind wasn't consistent enough in that particular region. And I think what David's getting to is that, especially sun, us in the Pacific Northwest, we only have so many sun days to count on, especially when Seattle's 90 inches of rain a year, but Portland is 60. That's a big difference, but how much sun can I get in Portland versus Seattle could greatly affect, the revenue off of my project, if that makes sense.
There's also a transmission,
Yeah.
distribution, transmission
loss.
factors you got lost, you have to consider. There's also quality of panel supply chain, right? So if you actually you pencil a project today, a year down the road, and you ask you to commission whatever, you have to have the panels ready to go. It may be different at that point in time. So exactly, all those costs are variable. So it can get messy. So you really have to be on top of it really tight and be monitoring it.
Sidebar question to that. So in their situation, you got 3 different people giving you 3 different numbers. So what would be your recommendation for a way to sort that out, right? So he's got these 3 different numbers.
There's no transparency either. They're just headline numbers.
Right. So it's like, do you go start over? Do you go get a independent third party to give them something? Like, what's the...
Sure. So how I would do it and how what we have done is we actually went to the DOE and got technical assistance, because if you use their numbers, they're going to be a little bit better and they'll be more transparent. And I will be honest with you, everyone in this room, transparency is key. If somebody's working with you and not providing you information that you need to know, I would move on, because in this business, you got to be extremely transparent. And so,
Yeah, that's my view too.
yeah, and so
Yeah.
we actually had a bad experience with a DOE application that we went all the way through the grant process. 1 week before submission, we're like, hey, you guys promised a cash flow analysis. Where's your cash flow analysis? Oh, well, we don't need it. I said, no. You agreed you're providing this in the beginning. We went through this whole process. They did not provide us cash flow analysis. We submitted our grant without it because they wouldn't give it to us. Lack of transparency at the very end. It cost us our grant opportunity. That cost us 5 months of work. It's just because of that lack of transparency. What they said that they would in the beginning. Again, this is an entity that wanted to do a PPA arrangement with us to sell us their equipment that they would manage and operate, and we could buy back after the new market tax credits have expired after 7
But
years.
that was the only way to do it
At that time.
at that time.
Yeah, you gotta kind of do what you gotta do at the time. Now is totally different. So now is the time to do what you guys need to do. I will ask a last note before we have to bounce out. I want to say thank you to my chairman, Tim Rod, because he was the one who formed Grace No and mandated that we as Grace No are an open source company. Meaning that if any tribe out there wants support or help, we were not the ones that turned them away and say, no, we can't help you, sorry. So we're very open, we're very transparent. Our job is to reestablish intertribal relations and intertribal trade. So by sharing that, feel free to reach out to me. I will tell you everything we're doing on our project. We're not hiding anything here, because our information that we have can go to you. If it helps you guys out, great. If it doesn't, so be it. But we're very open source to you guys. We're very open about everything. Our team is very open at all. So please, if you guys have questions like that, please do reach out anytime.
Yeah, same for Tepa as well. That's the charge of our tribe, is to help in any way we can. So we go ahead, take a photo, whatever you need, or come by and say hi and collect a business card. We're happy to help in any way we can.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. Thank you for the great presentation.